So now comes the speeded up session for the professionals, okay? So this was the introduction for those who are not so familiar with Horizon 2020 yet, and now we're coming to the section for the professionals. So I have this presentation to guide you how to develop your proposal. Usually there's a research idea you have, right? So, hello, do you want to take your seat or are you? Okay, good. So, your research idea should solve a specific problem. Usually in Horizon 2020, there's a problem in the topic, and that can be solved by your research idea. Okay? And from this, you develop a concept. The concept is then driving what sort of partners you're involving, what sort of methods you're requiring, how many patients you need, do you need animals, research, whatever, okay? So in this concept, which you probably put on a piece of paper with just a couple of notes, and you probably identify already specific expertise you want. You can identify then what is state of the art, what is currently done, right? What is in your field, in your specific area, the current approach to tackle this problem, which has not been solved, right? Otherwise, the call would not be there. So then you say, I propose going beyond the current state of the art. This is the most important bit. Horizon 2020 only funds research which goes beyond the state of the art. What you regularly do in your lab is not sufficient to get your money, okay? You have to somehow go beyond what you do normally. This also has to be described in section 1. Where do you go beyond the state of the art? You describe what you usually do and also explain this is the basis for going beyond the state of the art in a specific area. Obviously, you can't do it everywhere, but a specific area you can go beyond the state of the art. And if you don't identify this, it will be a weak point. So you have a specific aim. It's also defined by the impacts, right? So the expected impacts are telling you what your aim should be. And you somehow find one phrase, one sentence, one paragraph, if you want, to describe how your research will achieve a specific aim under which umbrella all the expected impacts can fall, right? So in the example which we had earlier, there was about real-world data. So if you want to incorporate real-world data into your decision-making of clinical management, what is the real challenge in the field at the moment? You have to identify this and explain to me, how can I do this? What is the specific addition you can contribute to this long-standing problem that clinicians are completely overwhelmed with data and they cannot keep all the data in their minds of one patient, and then they only make the decision on a subset of data. So then you have to come up with specific objectives under this one aim. Separate this in clear portions of this one big aim, what you want to achieve. And this structure then becomes your work packages. Objective 1 is work package 1, and so on. And then you decide to achieve objective 1, whatever it is, there will be a number of tasks. Which tasks do you have to complete very concrete research tasks to achieve this one objective. And then you also know who can contribute to these in your team. And this is basically the framework of your proposal. This is the bones, okay? So if you want to, you have a picture of this in the, Arnaud will provide you this. For me, this is how a proposal looks like in a scientist's mind, okay? But then the EU comes with their setup, okay? They want to have scientific excellence, they want to have impact, and they want to have implementation. So where do I find those different sections, okay? So this is concept. This is all implementation, right? And here, this is impact. So if you identify for yourself in your researcher's mind all those boxes, you can write in. If you have 3 objectives, if you have 4 objectives, it's modular. So you can expand it and collapse it as you want. But just use this as a framework if you want. You can, maybe it's not the best one. Maybe you can develop it further and improve it. Let me know about it, what you don't like about it. But the main thing is fill all those boxes with names, with research jobs, and structure your entire project on basically one A4 page. And then you know how to write your proposal. Okay, so some of you, I contacted you with key phrases. I think this is also, when I support coordinators, this is the one thing I send them first. One sentence for your aim, one sentence for each objective, one sentence for your hypothesis. You don't need more. If you need more, you make a mistake. Then you are too complicated, then you're mixing things up. These core sentences, they will be the grains of wisdom you want to spread throughout your project. You can work on them day and night. If you 3 months before you before you submit the proposal, you fill this in for the first time. That doesn't mean they have to be like this by the time you submit it. You can always change them. You can always work on them. Make them yours, right? Make those descriptions yours and really try to convince your collaborators to buy into this. This is basically your second sheet, where you have clear sentences which should basically be spread out throughout your proposal as those very clear points where the evaluators say, yes, I can tick this, I understand the aim, I understand the objectives, I understand the impact. Okay, so scientific excellence is the first part you have to write. Or the evaluator has to read. It's not the first part you have to write. Everybody has a different take. Some people start with the work packages, whatever they do. But in the first page, you have your objectives. And we discussed just that you will define your objectives already before. So you know already what you have to write. If you have your one aim and your 3 objectives already defined, this first page will be easily written, but only if you really have agreed on those objectives, right? So don't start writing before you have agreed on the objectives. So, do the homework first and define those objectives. Make them very clear, make everybody agree on them, and then you start writing. And then it's easy.
That means that we must connect with our partners to make with the consortium to make this objective, or we make the idea before and after we discuss this idea with the consortium?
Absolutely. You have a research idea, you have objectives, you have tasks, and if you don't settle on those before you start writing, you have to write the entire proposal twice. Because you start writing and then you change your mind and then you have to throw everything out and start from scratch again. Right? So you first settle on who is doing what. Who is the work package leader? What work packages do I need? what are my aims, what are my objectives. And if you have this, this core sentences or this core tasks distributed and agreed upon, then the entire consortium is also very clear about what you're aiming at. If they always have to write 10 pages first before they know what you want to do, it's complicated, right? When will they read the 10 pages, and maybe also they don't read it accurately. But if you only have 1 page with 10 sentences on, it's much more accessible, much more easily to discuss. Yeah? So, if you have your objectives, then the next thing is relation to the work program. So, there is in the call scope of the proposal or scope of the topic description, okay? This is basically telling you what the Commission expects from you, okay? The work program has always some policy background. Yeah, they want to advance personalized medicine. They want to advance whatever. Somewhere will be written which fits your proposal. And in the scope, it is broken down for this one topic very clearly again. Read this, understand in depth what it is, discuss it with your colleagues, and then you will understand what your research is meant to deliver to the EU. Because the EU is giving you money, to fulfill a specific policy aim. They're not giving you the money to do blue sky research. This is a different program. In research and innovation actions, they have a policy behind giving you the money to do personalized medicine, improve treatment of chronic diseases, whatever. And you have to identify what this scope of the Commission is. And that's in the call, and they help you, they define this. So if you ignore this information, the evaluator, again, is left with a mix of things you probably pulled from somewhere else. Okay, so the scope is clearly defined, and you explain in this relation to the work program how your research will fulfill specific policy objectives of the Commission. Why are you reducing the costs in the public health sector? Why are you improving the quality of life of citizens? Why are you strengthening the industrial leadership in Europe? All those sort of things, right? They're all in policy documents available to you. You have to check them, and then you have to provide your take on them in this work program, right? Sorry?
Do we have always to emphasize the impact on European? For instance,
Yeah,
we are working
it's a European program.
on specific population.
It's a European program.
Yes. We have to manage how to...
Yeah, no. So if you have a specific population in Tunisia, that is very nice, and it's a very good tool to address whatever health problem they have in Europe. Right?
We have to just insist on
Yeah, because they don't, if it's a Tunisian problem, then you get money from Tunisia. Right?
You have to make it a European problem.
You don't have to make it a European. The Europeans have enough problems by themselves. You just have to explain to me why Europeans will benefit from you solving the problem in Tunisia. Okay? I told this earlier, I asked you earlier, right? You say there's 35% of this one mutation which underlies Parkinson's disease. So my first question is this a specific mutation, or is this also present in Europe? And you said it's present in Europe. So it's a European problem. So, but you can say, oh, look, we have an advantage here in Tunisia because it's not so rare. Actually, we have a large patient population in a very small country, comparatively small country, and therefore we have a lot of expertise handling those patients. We have many of those patients. We don't need to look for them. So it's an advantage, and you turn this advantage into an advantage for Europe to work with you, right? So again, use a table for this. So there's a list of, if there's a list of things in the work program, there's a list of things also in your proposal. And as an evaluator, I like lists. I'm really, really sorry to say this, because I do like writing, and I do like writing long texts. But for an evaluator, they're a real pain. So if I see a table, I know where to find specific things. And then I just tick, 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 and say, yes, everything is there, I'm happy. Or if I get a long text, I read 10 days ago, I need to go into this again, and I have to read it again, and actually there's this stupid mistake, and there's no paragraph, and where is it again? So really make it easy to find those essential bits in a table. And then, really, as I just said, there is, in the beginning of the work program, there's 3 to 5 pages description of what is about personalized medicine, what is it about chronic diseases, what is it about neurodegenerative disorders, what is the EU take on all those sort of things. All the texts are written. You just have to read them. And the most important thing is you can copy-paste them. They're available to you. If they say whatever clinical management of chronic diseases is whatever, needs some, some activity, or personalized medicine is lacking whatever, then you just say, we perform task 1, 2, 3 to solve the problem of personalized medicine, blah, blah, blah. So use the same terminology, use the same phrases, use the same texts. You can even use the same sentence. When they say, this is a problem, you just say, this is the solution. For me as evaluator, it might be cheap for you to copy-paste, but for me as evaluator, I don't have to think about, is this now addressing the problem or not? Because if you say it's addressing exactly the problem as stated in the EU blurb, then I know it's there. I don't have to think. I just tick the box and everything is happy, right? And I'm happy that you make it easy for me, all right? So don't worry about copy-pasting. It's also, it helps me as an evaluator if you only say it once in the right place, in the right position, highlight it, save space, so you can sort of structure it nicely for me, give enough, return extra to structure it. But if you repeat things, I'm really annoyed, because I don't have time to read things twice. I have half a day to read your 60 pages, then I have to read something 3 times. It's not going to work, okay? So concept and methodology. Methodology doesn't mean the methods you're applying. It means the approach you are using to tackle a specific problem, okay? So it's really, we discussed this earlier, and in my scheme, the concept is, if you want to incorporate real-world data into clinical decision-making, you will have a specific approach to do this. And don't just tell me that you will do this, a specific data set. I want to know what the specific data set will provide to clinical decision-making, okay? If you just say, oh, I use this data set, it comes miraculously somewhere, and I don't define what is in there, I don't understand. There's no concept, okay? Just stating something is not a concept. This is just a statement. I want an explanation. You are scientists, but the evaluators are scientists as well. They want to understand. If they don't understand, they won't give you full points. So you have to explain. You have to explain. You have to provide information. You cannot only make statements, okay? So it's the same thing again. All those projects are usually asking for multidisciplinary approaches, okay? You cannot just say, this is a multidisciplinary project, full stop. As an evaluator, I say, why? Just because you say so? I don't know you. Why should I trust you? You have to explain, this is a multidisciplinary project because we combine expertise in blah, 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 and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Then I see, oh, 3 disciplines, wonderful. Explanation, very simple for you, very simple for me, okay? If you just say, this project combines blah, 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 without mentioning multidisciplinary, I lose my keyword. Even so, you have the same explanation, but if you don't say multidisciplinary in the same context, then I'm scanning through this, looking for this. Why was this multidisciplinary again? I do not find it. And then I can't fight for you. So mention both things together. Why it's multidisciplinary, the explanation, and the fact that it is multidisciplinary. Then it makes sense. And that goes through the entire proposal. For everything you explain. For everything, you use the key phrases from the topic, recycle those phrases, and provide your specific explanation.
How do we identify those keywords that must figure in the manuscript?
You read the topic and you read the work program. And that's the work program. Yeah? So the work program is not only your topic. At the beginning of the work program, there's 3 to 5 pages policy which explains the rationale behind the Commission's decision to put out those projects. Why are they focusing on chronic diseases? Do you know this? They will explain to you. They will have references, they will have explanations, they will have data. It's all there. You only have to pick it up.
Copy and paste.
Exactly. Absolutely. And there's bonus points for making it very clear by copy-pasting, okay? So you explain what is the state. Yes, please. No? No?
And exactly the same terms. We don't have to just...
No, but personalized medicine, why would you want to change personalized medicine into individualized medicine? What is the sense? It's a technical term you have to use, right? You don't have to mince words, right? You have to make it very simple and clear. Yeah? It's not that the evaluators are stupid. The evaluators have no time, and they have no patience. Imagine somebody reading 10 proposals. And
Can I ask you a question?
yeah,
About, because there's a checking, like the commission do some checking for plagiat, like if there's any copy-paste,
yes.
and for sure, like, I don't know, if it's just definition is fine, but if copy-pasting, like pages, then they will find out that.
No, that's not. It's a misunderstanding. Very good that you point this out. So, if you, well, no. So if you use sentences from the work program, that's fine. Obviously, that's what I'm referring to. Don't use. So you were asking this, right? Don't use from a review. I don't know, if you talk about neurodegenerative diseases and you want to quote from a review that something is really important or whatever it is, then you obviously need to quote. Yes, clearly, because it's a reference. Otherwise it would be a plagiat, right? But if you recycle phrases from the Commission in the work program, I also mean that you use basically when they say we have, sort of due to the aging populations, we have an increasing number of patients with chronic diseases, right? Basically, you use this sentence to expand on it, right? We are focusing on neurodegenerative diseases because in the aging population, these chronic diseases are on the rise, whatever. So you're recycling this, but you're rephrasing it as well. But use the same phraseology, use the same terms. Don't invent your own terms. That's what I mean. You don't have to copy-paste the exact sentence. Thanks for pointing this out. Okay. So one of the things what my customers frequently fail to understand is the distinction of going beyond the state of the art. So somewhere you have to explain what your proposal is adding to the current state of the art. Yes, that's what we discussed earlier. So that means also that we have to understand what the current state of the art is. So you give a brief paragraph that the current state of the art in clinical management of a specific disease is whatever data, and it's lacking something else. And now you say we go beyond the state of the art by making these sort of data available to the clinician with an artificial intelligence module, so they have an easy readout, right? Because the data is already, they could access it, but it's too complicated for them. It doesn't help to say, oh, I make it accessible to them. You have, going beyond the state of the art is meaning to provide a specific tool so they can easily access this data, easily understand this data. This is going beyond the state of the art. It's not just saying, oh, now they will have access to this data. That's not sufficient, okay? So this is how you explain to go beyond the state of the art. Yes? Yeah. Yeah. It's an important aspect to build on previous Horizon projects, in particular if you have been involved in them, right? If you, or somebody in your consortium, it's always a bonus. If you can explain that there was a project which has been concluded or ideally is still running, and you are building and looking for synergies, that's one of the most important things you can write under synergies, right? If you say, there's this project which stopped here, and now we're going to pick it up from there and provide additional impacts to this, obviously evaluators will like this. But the most important thing would be if there's projects still running. If you go through the lists, so Cordis has an extremely good search function for projects which are currently active, or all projects since, I don't know, FP7, right? So if you look for your specific disease, projects which are currently active, maybe there's somebody you know. So if you could say, oh, and basically we are also looking at this patient cohort from project X, that would be extremely good. So not only looking at the projects which have already concluded, but in particular looking to collaborate with existing projects is a bonus. Yeah? It also means that it's clear to the evaluator that there is not something done which is done already somewhere else. If you collaborate with another project, it becomes immediately clear that, they're looking with other important leaders in the field. They don't repeat things which are already done somewhere else. They're aware of what is happening. So this is the best thing what you can do. So this is about synergies, okay? Where are synergies is one of the most important things, right? It's very simple. I don't necessarily believe in all the synergies as an evaluator, but I still have to tick them, right? I'm still asked by the evaluation protocol, are there synergies? So, if the vice chair is asking me, so what are the synergies? And I say, oh, they're not described. Sorry? Synergies is very simple. If somebody else does work on something very similar to you, right? You basically raise synergies by saying, oh, I share tasks. You do this one thing where you're very good, and I do the other thing where I'm very good, okay? And then we pool our data, and that means we have synergies because you do what you're good at, I do what I'm good at. We pool our data, And then we don't have to do things which we are not good at, because maybe I'm not good at what you're doing, and vice versa. So then basically I'm sharing responsibilities and tasks, and then synergies arise from actually there's more to these two data sets than just the individual data. Did you get this? Sorry. Badly explained.
The synergy here is very important. For example, there's two projects, like the one implementing one type of project, but the second one is very close. But the results of both projects will give some synergy. That means like you will be involving more in terms of dissemination. The end users, they will be using the result of the project. It has multiplying effect. Instead, like you have an impact very located here, like at the national or regional level or at the European level, but both together you have increasing, like amplified, exponentially.
It's more than the sum of its parts,
it's
basically.
It's not sample just one to one. Will be much more higher. That's the difference
Right.
here.
Is this part that we should do for other projects being financed?
Running, at
Yeah.
the same time as you.
Yeah. But it's not restricted. It's not restricted to EU projects. Obviously, it's nice if it is EU projects. So, but
You mentioned, for
You
example,
mention-
it's just started the project and you submitted your project and you mentioned that the project just started like a year ago. You say we can work with them and involve like the board or whatever, like the partner, and use like part of the results and will be like a synergy. We'll work together in the results. And then we'll have like more impact. It's very important, the impact part. That means you have to screen, you have to look for all the projects related to yours. It's like we're doing for our research paper, the state of the art, looking for papers, and same thing for projects in Cordis.
so it could not, it's important to say that it's not even only talking about, Parkinson's disease. For example, if there's a specific, let's say a specific diagnostic tool currently used for Alzheimer's disease, but not for Parkinson's, you might even think, we could raise synergies by actually using this one diagnostic method which has been developed for Alzheimer's disease also in Parkinson's disease. Would also be a synergy. So, transferring those sort of outputs from also other projects, right?
Other SC1 or other projects?
If it's a Horizon 2020 project, then it's nice, but if it's another one, it's also good. But the main thing is evaluators are asked to identify, have they identified synergies? Are there synergies? And if you say there are synergies with Horizon 2020 programs, you get a star, okay? If there's synergies with other activities in Tunisia or in France or wherever, then you get a plus, okay? And if you don't explain any synergies, then you get a minus, okay? So getting a plus is a 4, all right? Getting a star is a 5. Okay, so and I cannot stress enough how important it is to convince the evaluator that whatever you plan to do beyond the state of the art is feasible. We just said beyond the state of the art is something what is usually not done anywhere else in the world, all right? So now the evaluator comes, how reasonable is this claim, right? Can they really do this? And I can look at your publications and I can look at your web presence and whatever. The most convincing fact would be preliminary data you can put in the proposal and convince me that the assay is under development, all right? Or has already been developed but not published yet. So include some crucial data in your proposal to convince the evaluator that you have the expertise you're claiming to have.
Even not published. Preliminary data.
Yes, if it's published data, it's already published. You put the reference, right? You don't need to, there's rare exceptions where I would say that published data can be included in your proposal. But if it's published, everybody can see it, right? You don't need to put the data in. Yeah, you only reference it. It's a restricted communication, so it will not infringe on patenting or anything. So not on publication, whatever. So you don't have to worry that somebody will take it away from you. But clearly, the evaluator will read it and maybe steal, oh, these guys are doing this, I try it out myself. Obviously this might happen, right? But so be careful with it in that sense. But it will not cause you any problems in publishing, right? So this is just some examples. I pulled off this one proposal I really like. You can see the way we prepared this data for the proposal is not the way it is in the paper or will appear in the paper. Yeah, it is specifically color-coded and selected for this proposal. Select the data you want to show in the proposal to specifically make the point. Use the color code. Really make it specific for this proposal, because for me as an evaluator, I don't want to see 5 different columns on the right which are not relevant. Yeah? I just want to have a look at it and immediately understand what this is about. Okay? So, these 5 red points here, I can immediately see why they have been selected in the specific range. They're highlighted, they're clearly identified. This is what we need, okay? Also these graphs, right? I mean, in this graph we always use, for the wild type we always use black and we always use blue for the mutation. So it goes through the entire proposal. Every graph is the same. So I don't have to, think about, I only have to think about it once, I understand it, and I understand it throughout the entire proposal. And that's making it easy for the evaluator. The main thing is, I say it again because it's so important, if you have very little time to get all the strong points of your proposal, is hard enough as it is. But if you make me struggle, I will miss some of the strong points. If you hide them from me, then I will not be able to give you the pluses and the stars you require for a 5. Scientifically, you might be as good as somebody else. If you describe it less well, I have less time to really understand what you're doing, right? And then, if I don't understand it completely, I cannot give you full points. That's as easy as it is. So, the last section in the scientific excellence is your ambition. So before we go into the next section, which is impact, we will get a brief paragraph of, in a nutshell, what your project wants to achieve. Right? How will you do it? A clear and concise description of what, with all this research, 5 million euros spent on whatever it is, what will come of it? Make it very concise, make it very clear, because that prepares then for the impact. Because now we only describe, the facts of the data you will achieve, right? The hypothesis you will confirm, whatever it is. So this is the scientific data you want to, your ambition to achieve, right? So it's not the exploitation of it. It's only what within the project you aim to, what your ambition is to achieve within the 3 or 5 years, not beyond. Because impact is something which goes beyond the project's lifetime, right? The worst thing about the fact about your ambition is that you can fall, it's a very, very narrow walk, very, very narrow cliff. you can fall off on both sides. You can be not ambitious enough, and then it's just run-of-the-mill and boring. But you can also be too ambitious. You can be unrealistic. You can claim things I don't believe you will be able to do. And that's just as bad. So you just need to stay in the middle of the road. Ambitious, but I trust you to achieve this ambition. If you're promising me the blue sky, maybe I will be doubtful, and then I also give you negative marks. I showed you this picture before, and I think this is, as I said before, I think this is really, really important to explain to the evaluator your ambition. Whatever your project is, make a little sketch on a piece of paper. This is your third piece of paper you need to prepare your proposal. Okay, we said you need this sort of framework, the bones, we need your key phrases, and then we need your graphical abstract. My customers, they provide me sometimes just a little scribble. 5 words, a little circle, a mouse, whatever it is. Start with something very easy and just condense it and just come up with a very simple explanation of an extremely complicated scientific process. But we are visual creatures. 80% of our information which we take in is visual. So if I see something, it helps me to understand and to connect. Yes? So invest into this.
So there is a real difference between ambition and objective. I understand.
No. So the objective is something what you, well, we're not talking about English, okay? We're not talking semantics. But in your project, your objective is a clear goal you aim to achieve within the project, okay? And your ambition is that you will actually go beyond the state of the art in a specific area of your research area, okay? In a specific aspect of your research, you will do something extraordinary which nobody has done before. And this is your ambition, okay? The main thing is the EU has its own phraseology. We discussed this before. Use the phrases. If they talk about hypothesis in a specific way, don't use your usual way of talking about hypothesis. If they use objectives in a specific way, don't say, oh, I use objectives in my daily work completely differently, therefore I'm not saying objectives to the EU objectives. Use their terms. Why? The evaluators have 10 parallel proposals. And if one of them falls out of this phraseology, all of a sudden I'm confused. Why are they now talking about ambitions when it's actually objectives, right? It doesn't make sense to me. I have to think again. And I don't want to think about those simple things. I want to focus my brain on the really important aspects of your proposal, the ones which are difficult to understand as they are, right? So make it easy in these aspects. Use the same terms, use the same phraseology, and that's what scientists do all the time. Scientists have their own language. That's why the public doesn't understand you well, because you're just using your own codes. But the EU has their own codes for their research projects. So you have to use their codes. You have to familiarize them and stick to them. So impact. Impact is one of those things scientists don't like to write. Why is this? Why don't you like to write impacts? Do you like it? You like it?
It's the hardest part.
Sorry?
It's the hardest part of
But why is this so hard?
imagination.
You make promises. Expected impacts are promises. Okay? The ambition is something still concrete, and I think that's something what you subscribe to that you will be able to achieve within your proposal. But impacts is now about promises. It's beyond the project's lifetime. It's something out of your control. And you have to accept this. Yeah? So nobody will hold you responsible for if you don't solve whatever crisis you're claiming to solve, whatever health problem you're claiming to solve. But you still have to make a good case that you might contribute to it. And it's the thing to understand, that's the contribution you have to identify. Clearly, nobody's asking you for a 5 million project to solve Parkinson's disease. But identify the specific contribution you might be able to deliver, which then has an impact on probably quite large number of patients. And whether it is improving their quality of life, whether it's improving treatment options, whether it's improving the diagnosis, whatever it is, clearly identify it. And then when you identify this one specific aspect, you multiply it by the number of patients, you multiply it by the costs each patient generates in the public health sector, and all those sort of things. Yeah? And then all of a sudden you generate the impact, and you can see it. So it has to be extremely clear where you coming with your numbers. But impact is now, as we talked about promises, it's about numbers. So you need to know how many Parkinson patients there are in Europe. You need to know how many people are suffering from mitochondrial diseases. You need to know the relevance, okay? And from there, you derive your impacts, okay? So again, the EU actually helps you. In your topic, you have the expected impacts. So this is your list. This is your bucket list. If you don't know these 6, stick them up in front of your desk and think about where is your individual contribution to all those, right? And really don't accept any excuses for, in this one, maybe we can skip this one, or it's not so important. All of them are important, okay? So find a way to address all of them, share it with your colleagues, ask them whether they think it's convincing, and again, be concise. You don't have actually that much space for impact. 3 lines to the point are much better than 30 rambling on. So I told you it's about numbers, right? So be very clear about European numbers. You can also say global numbers, but it's again for the evaluators' task to compare your project with another. So if you use other numbers than the other projects who are using European numbers, it makes it complicated again. And why are you not using European numbers for a European project? You can explain this. Sometimes European numbers are actually not so good as US numbers. If that is the case, you can still say, based on whatever US data, we estimate in Europe are so many patients suffering, whatever. Give a European estimate. It's a European program. In the US, if you look at R01s funded by the NIH, they don't quote European numbers. Why would they? It's a US project, right? So I see this a lot, that people coming with US numbers, even so European numbers are available. It's no excuse, yeah? Sorry?
Can you use the whole world numbers, for example, the number of patients in the world?
You can. I'm not saying you can use any numbers you want, but also European numbers. It's a European program, and if you want to explain the impact the European money has, you also explain, because actually the Europeans don't care much about the public health care in the US. Or in India, or in southern China, whatever, right? It's a European project, and it should have a European impact. If you think, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use global numbers or shouldn't use US numbers. You can say them, you can mention them as well. If it's a relevant market for your impact, why not mention it? But to make it comparable to all the other projects, it makes sense to give the European number as well. It's not much space you need. You can also use tables again. You can use European number in bracket global hyphen US number, right? But it's about the reference points. Yeah.
Here, they have to write like the maturity of their, for example, a prototype or whatever, and how it will go from
technology readiness level.
From which step to another step using.
Yeah. In health, it really depends on the project. I would really say in health, there are rare occasions where you need it. In particular, if you talk about projects which include clinical studies. If you are talking about IT solutions which you want to implement, certainly also technology readiness levels. But in principle, in most health projects, if it's about diagnostics, it's about, I would advise not to stretch it too much. I think there's a very small number of health projects where technology readiness levels are important. You can mention them anywhere, and it won't do any harm. I specifically took them out because I find they are actually also. Sometimes it's a stretch, and I would not force you to use it unless really you have a specific IT solution you want to claim that it becomes accessible or implemented within the time frame of your project. Then you would probably identify that the current prototype is of technology readiness level whatever, and you say we will bring it to a new level within the project. That, I think, is something what you can say here. If it's about a drug, technology readiness levels are not very helpful, and it's accepted in the field, and it's much more used by companies, and even there people are fighting about whether a specific drug is technology readiness level whatever before it enters clinical trials. So it's very formalized. Basically, a drug, I think, is technology readiness level 4 when it completes preclinical development, and then it becomes 5 when it enters safety testing.
How about the standard, the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, like for example with basic and going higher to like a GMP or something?
Yeah. So I think.
Great. Something like
Yeah, exactly. So I think standard operating procedures are in many health projects are important, especially if it's about production, especially if it's about biomarkers, and clearly also anything about diagnostics. So if you want to claim that you are developing anything which should enter clinical management, you have to not only explain that you will be developing standard operating procedures, but also how you will actually make sure that these standard operating procedures are adhered to. That's an exploitation and dissemination aspect. Therefore, it becomes really important. So because if you say, I'm developing a standard operating procedure, who cares? If you have your standard operating procedure, I have mine, we have different opinion, it will be a problem, right? So if you develop a standard operating procedure and say this is really important for whatever, for diagnosing mitochondrial dysfunction in the brain, how will you convince the field to use this procedure throughout Europe, globally, for a specific purpose? You go through your scientific or clinical association, you explain in what sort of, where your consortium is actually represented in those sort of associations. You say, oh, we are the chair of this and we have access to whatever. And so this is basically in the dissemination and exploitation part where you explain step by step how you ensure that your development will be of use for the community. Because that's the most important thing, that you don't keep it to yourself. Standard operating procedures says, in itself that it should become a standard. And that's actually an important aspect, that obviously the EU wants you to do something which has a broader application, not only within the consortium. Especially when you have these support actions, there it's an important aspect to actually select standard operating procedures, define them, and make them available to the community. But making them available is not sufficient, right? Making sure that everybody will stick to it is then the impactful step, right? And how to explain how to make this happen is the most important part in impact. Make it tangible, explain it, because you can say, oh, the chair of this association in charge of accepting standard operating procedures is actually the scientific advisor of our project. That's, if he's not in the project, you make him the scientific advisor of your project, and then you already can say, look, he's actually looking at our development of the standard operating procedures. Clearly, he will be familiar with our output, and therefore he will then be able to support the implementation in whatever clinical field. These are the tricks, okay? So there is as soon as you go into health, there's a huge variety of beneficiaries of your research. It's not only the patients, and it's clearly the families of the patients, for example, especially with neurodegenerative diseases. You can also make the female argument then, because usually it's the females who are looking after patients. Very simple. You have to think of it, it just takes 3 lines. Also, it's actually, it's the cost in the healthcare system, the cost in the care, but clearly it's also, medical practitioners who are there, and the carers themselves who are probably benefiting from the fact that a new diagnostic is available. All those sort of things you don't have to elaborate, as I said, half a page about it, but just giving a statement that carers will benefit from a new diagnostic measure, which probably enables them to diversify the way they handle the patients, the clinical management. If you say it, one more stakeholder on your list. So be imaginative and think about all the different aspects of what the outputs could be. So the most important thing then is to be very clear about that this will not be easy, right? Because otherwise all the problems in the world will be solved already. So there will be barriers to all the impacts you just described. You can then say, oh, I identified whatever barriers, and it will not be easy. And then you just go on describing how at least some of these barriers will be overcome by specific activities you then describe in the dissemination exploitation plan, okay? That's also, again, buying trust with the evaluator, right? As soon as you identify barriers, immediately you say, I know it's not easy. I know there are some problems. I thought of them. And if you can then, in addition, identify how in the past some of your partners or you have contributed to overcoming some of these barriers, even better, right? So if you say, whatever, one of your partner has already, has a big patent portfolio and exploited so many, brought so many drugs on the market, you can say usually it's a big barrier to, improve, to bring new drugs on the market. But we have an established, partner X who has experience, department, whatever, 2 lines, and evaluator gets trusted that there is a partner in there involved who can actually take care of it, has the expertise to provide the impacts beyond the project, because they have the expertise, okay? So exploitation is again something which depends very much on the type of research you're performing. Are you developing a diagnostic measure? Are you trying to identify a disease mechanism, which is probably much further away from exploitation? So it really takes many different shapes. The main thing is, even if you are very far away from exploitation, you still have to make one paragraph. As I said, you can't leave out anything. One paragraph has to be there to provide potential exploitation potential for your, even if you say it's a disease mechanism, you can still say there might be new biomarkers arising from this, and biomarkers are one of the key things which are lacking in specific disease areas, right? So even there you can say we have connections to 2 SMEs who are focusing on biomarker development, whatever, right? And they, you provide an output there, you provide an exploitation strategy, if you want to call it like this, on 4 or 5 lines, and that's already, for me, to tick, yeah, they thought about exploitation, they know it's limited, we all accept it, but at least they have something written, and I don't give you a minus, because if you don't write about it, I'm asked by the chair to what are they doing about exploitation. They don't write anything. It's a minus, right? If you write at least something, they say, yeah, it's a limited, but it's the nature of the project, and we can't give them a minus for it because it's inherent to the project, but they describe the potential, which is very limited, then at least you don't get the minus. Important, right? Did you get this? Getting tired? No? Just bored? Okay, so, yeah. So, with exploitation, stakeholders are also, again, very important, right? You have to explain who will take up. You know what stakeholders are?
Yeah, but this is should be with how can I say the end users. Like, for example, we are a hospital. That means.
I know that you know it. By the way.
We're trying to think together with them, like how to have like those to maximize the impact. You need to amplify, to increase the number of end users. That means the one they will be using the solution, your results, the end users.
Yeah. So
impact.
Yeah.
And how to make it more like spread out, not at the national level. We are saying now European research area. That's something also. That's mean like the country is the one involved.
The countries is a strange stakeholder, but governments would be something you could say.
Something that's okay.
Yeah.
In the impact.
Yeah.
In the consortium.
So basically, yeah, who will benefit? This is basically stakeholders. Yeah, anybody. Stakeholders is basically meaning anybody who would be interested in your research. Okay. It starts with the scientific community. It ends with the child of a mother who is sick with a specific disease. Yeah? So it goes the whole entire range. Anybody who has the slightest potential benefits from your research. That would all be stakeholders. If it's a pharma company who might be interested in buying your product, it's a diagnostic company who might be interested in looking at the potential biomarkers which are coming out of your disease mechanism. All those are stakeholders. Right?
Yeah, but here's the thing. Sometimes even in the board. Like that means it's not, it's an associated partner, but not real partner, like who will be getting funding. That means he will be in the board, but like you mentioned he will be in the project, but he will not be getting funded. But it will be critical. This partner, for example, he has a wide, I don't know, involvement
Network.
in Europe or something.
Yeah. So if
Very, very important.
yeah, so scientific advisors are a crucial bit where you basically can incorporate stakeholders. As I said earlier, if you want to have a standard operating procedure implemented in Europe, basically get yourself the chair of whatever your association is in charge.
Yeah, foundation, association.
Yeah, if you're talking about a rare disease,
Yes.
get the patient organization on board, on your scientific advisors, all stakeholders, all right? So
Like something big, like a hub, like a cluster, like a
Yeah.
network, something like very big in Europe. And the board. Like involved in neurodegenerative diseases or something, like clinical trials. Yeah, this is like, you have to look purchase. And that's like the way, the intelligent way how to look for the work program, the FODs, and usually these people, they attend these big days, you know.
yeah, but I think the main thing is clearly, if you don't have prior contacts to those sort of people, you won't be able to recruit them on, oh, I want to have this proposal, now I need this scientific advisor. So all scientists who develop their consortium, they very early on discuss who will we want to put on our scientific advisory board. How large should it be? Should there be an ethics advisor? It's a step which is discussed very early. And it has to be done if there is a specific expertise you want on your scientific advisory board. It is always something you never approach them if you don't know them. If in the consortium nobody knows them personally, they identify people who would know them, who can approach them, who are not in the consortium, who basically make the link. So if you write to one of those guys an email and say, oh, I have this super interesting project planned and whatever, you write an email, you will never get a reply because they get probably 100 emails like this every day, right? So that won't work. So you always need to have a mediator, a connection.
To introduce you.
Yeah, and if that doesn't work, if you don't have a indirect connection, I think we go back to the long-term strategy, right? You have to think about those sort of experts you want in your network and go to those conferences where these people go to. Talk to them. You are all experts. You're outstanding researchers, right? Just because you're in Tunisia doesn't mean that you're different to somebody from Paris, Vienna, or Munich. So I also think the best people in this, they're always very busy, but I think the best people, they will also see that they provide an impact. I think if they have a connection to Tunisia, they might be able to see that they have a very different impact with their advice, because you're probably much more relying on proper advice and not just wanting him because of he's got a big name and it looks good. So I think that's the thing, also identifying the right people for this who are willing to make this contribution. But I'm just saying that there are certainly eminent figures in your field all over who probably would be quite willing to help, but they need to know you, they need to be convinced that you're doing outstanding science, and they also need to know what you want of them. They really want to know what you expect. Because if they want to help you, they have very limited time, and they won't be able to do everything, right? So you have to be crystal clear in your communication with those big shots. What is it you want? And if you can communicate this clearly, they will also probably tell you yes or no very clearly. And if they say no, and they're nice guys, they will give you an alternative. There will always be an alternative. There will be somebody else they know. There will be some idea. Maybe they have somebody in their lab who would be able to do this, who is still eminent enough. So, you have to talk to them. You have to get to know them, to find a way to introduce yourself, and conferences are the places to do this.
When we speak about that in impact, the relation with impact, if they are advisors, why we should mention this in the impact part?
Well, what we're just talking about is if you want to generate impact, you need to have a way to connect to stakeholders. And those scientific advisors might be crucial to connect to those stakeholders. If you think of a medical association, like the Association for Neurodegenerative Diseases, and you say, oh, I want that my standard operating procedure will be used all over Europe by all the neurologists. How do you achieve this? You won't achieve this by going to a conference and presenting a poster. You only achieve this by going to the chair of the relevant committee and say, look, here's my standard operating procedure. This is what I've done. What do you think of it? So if you do this, well, let's see what the success is. If the big professor, big shot, who's the scientific advisor in your project does it, maybe it looks a little bit better. And then I'm not, I don't know your expertise, but the way it looks on paper is, like this. So, and I must say it's really, really horrible, but proposals are on paper. I get this so much, but it looks only good on paper to involve this guy or that guy. Yeah, but it is paper. In the end of the day, it only has to look good on paper. Yeah, generate trust, generate credibility, generate the vision, right? And generate also this sort of, if this big shot trusts in you, why should I as an evaluator not trust in you? Right? It generates trust, it generates credibility, and it adds also to the sort of overall look of your proposal. It was clearly not just on the spur of the moment. It was something which you planned longhand, and you have a good network to implement it. Okay? So scientific advisors is an extremely important aspect. And don't just add those guys on it you like. You need to be very clear about their tasks. What is the scientific advisor actually contributing to the project? You can write this into your proposal in the implementation.
And I think we need the letter of support from them, or no?
Yes.
We need the letter of support from the scientific advisor. Just like to mention, like they will be involved with supporting that project. It's very important. It's critical. It's crucial for European level.
The worst thing what you can do, you have 3 scientific advisors typically, and then you give them, so they say yes, and you send me a letter of support, and then I sign it and put it on the institution's letterheaded paper and blah, blah, blah. They will not change a single word on this letter. They never do. So if you provide 3 identical letters to those guys, it's your fault. Because if I now check as an evaluator and read 3 letters of support which are identical, I know that these guys never contributed a single thought to this project. Right? But if you provide 3 different letters saying, oh, I'm so happy and whatever, and my expertise, and I don't know, all these sort of things are available on his website, or probably discussed it with you. And you just make slight modifications. For me as an evaluator, it's a trick. It's just on paper, but it works. I can tell you, I have proposals with 12 letters of support from different stakeholders. They all read the same. Do you think I'm reading the 10th? And I even stop after the 3rd. I don't even know who all those letters of support are. But if they're all different, I start reading them because I want to know what's written in them. So it's a very simple trick to give different letters of support to all the different scientific advisor or whoever you want to have a letter of support. If they're all identical, it's a big mistake.
Yeah. Sometimes ministries, like you can have letter of support of the ministry in the advisory board.
Yeah.
Like for example, they will say,
I would
this
not-
is important.
Yeah, I would not advise, yeah, well, I would really advise to get very specific, so scientific advisors, if there's a specific patient organization, if there's a specific, if you think like an SME would be interested, they will attend the meetings, whatever. I think those sort of levels, they make sense. If it's a public health thing, also think about the ministry. I would just really
Not the ministry,
give them,
directorate of,
yeah, just give them very clear, so give them a very clear task you can write in the implementation section. So we have incorporated, Professor X for this, the head of whatever company for exploitation, and I don't know what, right? So the patient organization to access whatever it is, right? So don't just write the names. Give them a clear task in the project, what you expect of them, and then for me everything becomes tangible.
It's usual to contact the expert to ask him what's his relation with this project.
No.
Do
You mean during the evaluation? No.
No?
No.
It's like employee.
No. I mean, clearly, there's no. I think if there's a signed letter and it gets funded, and it turns out that it was doctored or this guy never heard of it, I don't even know what they would do. I would not advise you to do it, but I do mean, if you would include a forged letter, obviously there would be a felony, right? So I think if, for example, the project is funded and this guy is not joining for whatever reason, he signed it and then all of a sudden he decides, it doesn't work out, whatever, right? Then nobody will, that will not mean that the EU takes the money away from you again. You will just have to explain to the EU that, unfortunately this guy canceled for whatever reason and we have a substitute, do you agree with it? That's usually how it works. The main thing is, when you go into implementation of projects, you have a scientific officer who will be in charge of your project. He will be probably having 30 projects or something like this, but he is meant to guide you through the implementation phase and know of all the problems you might have. So if you write about a problem to him because the scientific advisor is not available or whatever, the worst thing is, I don't know what to do. My scientific advisor has just dropped out. The right thing to do is, I'm really sorry to inform you that the scientific advisor XYZ just canceled for whatever reason, but here we have a substitute. Do you agree with him? He has whatever expertise. Here's his profile, ORCID, blah, 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 and I think he will be a wonderful addition to the project. And then the scientific officer says, wonderful, I don't have to think about anything, problem is solved, excellent, yes, include this guy. Nobody will talk about it anymore, right? So this is how you, in the implementation phase, how you solve problems with the commission. If something goes wrong, not all the things will work out in the same way you described it in your proposal, right? The main thing is, it's going to be administrative burden to change things for everybody, not only for the commission, also for you, but you will always have to bring the commission a solution to the problem you're facing. Because why would they be coming up with a solution? They don't know the project that well, right? You are the guys on the ground who know how to solve a problem. They just have to say, okay, if this is your preferred solution, and I agree with it, or I can see that it makes sense, then everything will be fine. There's a detour into implementation phase already, in case, you get it. And I keep the fingers crossed that it will happen. So I just went back. So one of the things which is also under, yes, please. Sorry, I didn't get, about the?
The letters of support,
Yes?
are they mandatory?
No. No. They're nice, but yeah, as I said, I think it really depends on the project a lot. But I think the standard operating procedure is a very useful example of clearly identifying an outlet for your project. When you say, I want to develop a standard operating procedure how to diagnose a specific disease better, nobody cares unless it is made into national guidelines or European guidelines, right? Because if it's not in the guidelines, nobody will do it. You probably do it locally, and you probably are very successful in advancing clinical management, but maybe even the hospital next door won't be able to replicate it. But as soon as it becomes a national guideline or the European guideline, then everybody has to face to the fact that there is now a better way how to diagnose this specific disease, and they will have to adapt to your new procedure, right? So how will you be able to convince the European association of whatever disease to make this your standard operating procedure part of the European guidelines in managing whatever disease? How will you do this? If you say, oh, I will work really hard, I believe you, but I have no evidence that it will work, right? But if you tell me, oh, I know the chair of this committee, and he has agreed to join our project, he will therefore know what we will be doing, and therefore we will be able, if it makes sense, and we come up with a standard operating procedure, to have this standard operating procedure at least discussed in the committee with his support, then I think, yeah, clever strategy. Plus, star. That's what you need the scientific advisor for, and that's why it's not mandatory, because you can explain to me that, oh, I will work really hard to make the standard operating procedure, part of the clinical management in Europe. And I have to trust you that you will work very hard beyond the lifetime of the project and, are convinced. But it will be more credible if you go the other way, right? So it's the difference between the 4 and the 5. Okay? That's why I'm also saying scientific advisors are a nice thing to have. But if it's just name dropping, it's useless, because it's only a 4. Because everybody has some nice names on. But if you give them specific tasks, it makes the difference between I just added my friend and he will come and visit me in Tunis every year and he really likes that. Yeah, well, everybody does it and it's fine. But if I say, this is my friend and he likes to come to Tunis, but he will also work here, and these are his tasks, then I understand why this guy is coming. And he can be your friend, and he loves Tunis, and he probably wants to go to the archaeological sites every time. Whatever his reason is that he's coming here, I don't care. If you make him work, I don't care, okay? So it's a rationale. So one thing, what is missing in many projects, and it will become very, very important in the next Horizon program. It is, at the moment, it's only important. In the future, it will be essential. How you will deal with open access, open science, open data. If you do clinical data, it's an enormous challenge how to handle data, how to anonymize data, how to make it accessible even within your consortium. The next level is when you publish nowadays, you're all publishing in paper, and you're struggling. We all know that 50% of the data published in life sciences are not reproducible. So look at what Bernd Pulverer says from EMBO and all those guys. They're all working very hard to make data which you publish also electronically available, even down to the lab books. In the future, you won't be able to publish anything if you don't have electronic lab books anymore. It's a big movement, and you have to be on that movement. So if you want to have EU funds, at the moment, you have to provide basically only lip service to open access, to open data, and to open science. You have to write a paragraph about it, and that will be sufficient in Horizon 2020. In the future, it won't be sufficient anymore. In the future, you have to show that you'll be able to do it. Okay? So if you want to be in Horizon Europe, your institutions have to make sure that your data storage locally is compatible with providing all the data accessible into data banks. It's a huge, huge thing. So at the moment, you will still have to talk in your dissemination part in the maximizing impact, how you will publish. Will you be open access green? Will you be open access gold? Which repositories will you use for your data? Public repositories? Will you put your publications on the European, whatever the repository is for publications is obligatory? So there's a huge section on how you handle your data, how you publish, and how you sort of make your data accessible and exchangeable. It's basically, it's called the FAIR principles also, which are not on this yet. When you write about this, look at FAIR principles, basically making your data findable, accessible, whatever I is standing for, and R is reproducible. Yes? Sorry, I have this thing in the ear, sorry.
So if you will develop a solution, predicted algorithm to predict decision outcome,
Yeah?
the algorithm must be open access.
No?
No?
No, that's not what I said. You can patent, obviously algorithms you usually don't patent, but you can protect stuff. But I'm just saying specific publications you make, or specific data you have to make accessible. If you want to exploit it, right, and you want to keep some things private, you can still keep them private. So sorry? No, it's important to say that the Commission will not force you to do anything about the ownership of your outcomes. The EU says you can do whatever is done sensibly within the scientific community or in your field normally, and they will never ever stop you from exploiting the data, which basically means that your ownership is still the same. You can patent it, you can protect it as you please, but what I'm saying is when you publish in a scientific journal, at the moment, the amount of data you have to provide, a certain amount of raw data has to be placed into public repositories, whether it's the cells you're using, how they are described, whether it's the raw, if you do a genetic profile of something, you still have to put the sequence information into a specific repository. All those sort of things. There are repositories for many things, right? Protein structures, sequence information, whatever. There's repositories for almost anything. And you have to use those repositories, and you have to make your data compatible with those repositories. And in the future, I'm telling you, also experimental data in much more depth will have to be made accessible when you publish, which is also impacting how you record your data. If you have a student, okay, who is working with a standard paper lab book, how will you digitize this? If somebody says, oh, I want to have, I want to have the records of your plots and whatever it is, in a repository, you have to start scanning all those pages of your PhD student, and then you better look out that this has been properly recorded, properly dated, and all those sort of things. It's going to, I mean, I've had audits where auditors went into the institutions, they checked lab books, and I don't think I've ever seen a single audit where any lab book, complied with regulations. It just doesn't happen. Even the best lab books don't comply with regulations. It's just a fact. It's impossible, right? So I'm just warning you that there will be a huge challenge coming to all researchers, not only to the researchers in Tunisia, that with open science and open data, there will be a huge wave of recording your experimental data electronically. And your institutions have to be prepared for this. Not yet. Sorry, I'm just mixing up two things. But what I'm just saying, at the moment, you have to comply with specific standards. If there are public repositories for your data, you have to mention where you will put your data, into which the repositories. And if you don't mention this, you again have a minus point, right? So if there's a repository you don't know about and you don't mention it, it's a minus point again, right? So you need to be aware of all those repositories there are. And I'm saying for publications also, all your publications, they have to enter a repository, which is public access, even if it's only 6 months after publication. But all of them obligatory have to go into the European public, I think it's EPMC or whatever it's called. So there's a standard section you have to provide on all those open data. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to mention it. Okay. So how should we proceed? So we have another quick lunch break, and then I wrap up in another half hour after that, if that's possible for you, or